This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Turkey threatens to cut ties with the United Arab Emirates over deal with Israel. How will this affect the region? UK quarantine rules affecting France, the Netherlands, and other countries begin as travelers cry foul. And 7 African countries to begin antibody testing next week to track the extent of the coronavirus infections. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for watching. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. We take you for a ride on Kenya's standard gauge railway to see how COVID-19 has changed travel. And in sports, Ugandan Joshua Cheptegei breaks 16-year-old 5,000 meters world record in Monaco. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in Turkey, where the country's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he may suspend diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates and withdraw its ambassador in Abu Dhabi. The move is to protest an agreement between the UAE and Israel to normalize ties. The deal has drawn strong reactions across the Middle East, with many Arab nations calling the UAE's decision a shameful act. Meanwhile, the European Union has welcomed the agreement. Palestinians have long sought East Jerusalem as the capital of a future state and have looked to Arab nations to defend that stance. If the UAE normalizes ties with Israel, Palestinians fear losing any chance of future sovereignty in the city and guaranteed access to Al-Aqsa, which is considered as the third holiest site in Islam. All right, let's get you more on this story from our correspondent, Mikkel Bardavid, joining us live from Istanbul. Mikkel, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. First things first, Mikkel, how is the region reacting to this development concerning Israel and the UAE?
Yes, Richard. So let's take a closer look, starting with Iran, which is basically Israel's #1 enemy. So it's not surprising that it harshly criticized the deal, calling it a dagger in the back for all Muslims. Now, however, there are some reactions from Muslim and Arab countries that were also supportive of this deal, of this basically very major development. Egypt said it welcomed the deal, and President al-Sisi said he welcomed the efforts of those in charge of the deal to achieve prosperity and stability in the region. Now, 2 other Gulf states, Oman and Bahrain, also called the agreement historic. And also, it's important to note here that U.S. President Donald Trump, as well as his senior advisor Jared Kushner, also added that one country in the Arab world also might follow suit very soon. So there is speculation that one of these countries might be Bahrain or Oman in the upcoming days. So that can be expected potentially. There were supportive words from the EU, from countries such as Germany, the UK, or France. But statements basically appear to connect the deal with Israel's annexation plans in the West Bank. So basically assuming that this deal will mean that Israel will suspend its moves in the West Bank. So that's for what we have from the region so far. Richard?
Well, Mikkel, let me ask you this. What would be the impact if President Erdogan goes ahead and severs ties with Abu Dhabi?
Well, that's an important question, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be much of an impact potentially, because it's important to understand that Turkey and the UAE are already on very strained ties. They are on opposing sides of very serious issues, specifically for Turkey when it comes to economic, political, and security issues as well. One example would be the conflict in Syria and Turkey's moves against some Kurdish groups there, which Turkey perceives as a terrorist organization, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. The UAE has criticized some of Turkey's moves in Iraq. Also, another important issue that's very hot right now is Turkey's gas exploration efforts in the Eastern Mediterranean, and the UAE has also condemned Turkey's acts there. So this is also very important for Turkey as well. And another regional, very significant conflict at the moment, of course, is Libya, and the two countries are on opposing side there as well. While Turkey backs the government of national accord in Libya, the UAE has been a supporter of the General Haftar of the LNA. So basically, the two countries are already at odds on several issues. This one basically just is another addition.
Well, Mikkel, excellent points that you make there. That brings me to my next question. Turkey also has trade and diplomatic ties with Israel. Why is Turkey not directing its anger towards Israel on this deal to normalize relations with the UAE? Mikkel?
Well, basically, I mean, it's important to understand Turkey's stance with this issue right now is basically connected to the Palestinian issue. Turkey has been voicing a reaction in tone with solidarity of Palestinians. Ankara has been one of the biggest critics of Israel. Frequently, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has made very harsh comments against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Turkey expects and calls all Muslims to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians, to show their solidarity. So basically for them, this move is a betrayal to the Palestinian cause. So it's also important to note that Turkey's ties with Israel has already been strained, specifically after 2010, following the Mavi Marmara incident, when 10 Turkish activists were killed by Israeli commandos when these activists were trying to breach a blockade on the Gaza Strip. So this is not surprising either, because Turkey has also been strained with Israel during this time. Richard?
All right, Mikkel, let's leave it there for now. Thank you for bringing all of that there to light. That's Mikkel Bardavid speaking to us live from Istanbul. Moving on, the United States has seized 4 tankers that had been carrying Iranian gas to Venezuela. The State Department made the announcement on Friday. The U.S. says the shipment was in defiance of American sanctions. Mary Trini Mena reports from Caracas.
According to U.S. officials, no military force was used during the seizures. The 4 tankers were reportedly carrying more than 1 million barrels of fuel. The fuel was taken off the ships and now is headed towards a port in Houston, Texas. The U.S. says the shipment was undertaken by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Iranian ambassador to Venezuela denies his country had anything to do with the ships. In a tweet, he said, "This is another lie and an act of psychological warfare perpetrated by the U.S. propaganda machine." In May, Iran sent 5 other tankers containing 1.5 million barrels of fuel to Venezuela in defiance of U.S. sanctions on both countries. But the gasoline from that shipment has run out, and Venezuela is suffering from severe shortages of gasoline. People often wait in lines at gas stations for hours. The seizures are part of the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign to stop the flow of goods and money that are helping to keep the current governments of Iran and Venezuela in power. María Trini Mena, CGTN, Caracas.
All right, let's turn our attention to the oil spill in Mauritius, where a meeting was set for today to develop an update for oil flow in the region. The meeting brings together officials from several countries. This comes a day after the Japanese shipping company that owns the leaking bulk carrier said the government of Mauritius had requested compensation. Nagasaki Shipping Company said that the cause of the incident was still not known and would be fully investigated. This comes amid concerns that the oil spill is near protected marine park waters. All right, let's go live to Lou Feifei, who is following the developments in Meherbourg, Mauritius. Lou Feifei, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. My first question, a meeting was set for today to develop an update on oil flow in the region. Tell us more about who is attending the meeting and any updates from that, Feifei.
Absolutely. As of this morning, Mauritius is in a state of high alert. The new development is that the ship Wakashio is on the verge of breaking in half. From what we understand, this could happen now at any moment. And this, of course, is the catastrophic event that we've been waiting for over the past few days since the oil has been leaked out. The reason was that there was amounts of remaining oil still on board in the hull. Just to give you a background on that quickly, there were about 3,000 tons in the hull still after the 1,000 tons that spilled out. Most of that 3,000 tons has already been extracted by the salvage companies. Now what remains is approximately 50 tons of oil. And the reason it can't be extracted quickly is because it's deep in the hull, and it's in fact very dangerous for the salvage crew to actually reach those areas. So we can still see some helicopters in the area helping to extract small amounts of oil. So this is the key thing that is happening today. High alert. The boat is ready to break in half at any moment. Of course, that could be today. It could take days. Also, I should mention there's an anti-cyclone warning that is moving from the southeast up towards the east of Mauritius. Of course, with changing weather conditions, it could also expedite this. The other thing to update everybody is that they've also managed to extract some toxic hazardous paint that was aboard. So that is the good news. Additionally, today, the Vice Prime Minister of Mauritius has called an emergency coordinating meeting together with the police commissioner and many other government agencies to develop and update the Mauritian National Contingency Plan. So in fact, there has been always in place a national contingency plan which covers oil spills. The problem is that the oil spill amount that was covered was for about 100 tons. What happened when the Wakashio crashed here is that the amount of oil spilled was more than what their contingency plan had accounted for. And that's why now he has called together experts from the National Coast Guard, from the Japanese experts, the French experts from Reunion Island, the United Nations, and of course, expertise from the Chinese embassy and various other local NGOs and other international actors are here, and they have just wrapped up their meeting to draft a proposal on how to manage this emergency going forward.
All right, Lou Feifei, I'd like to thank you so much for that update and report. That's Lou Feifei speaking to us live from Mauritius. Moving on, 7 African countries will begin administering coronavirus antibody tests next week as experts try to determine the spread of COVID-19 across the continent. Africa has recorded more than 1 million infections, but the Africa CDC is worried that the numbers could be much higher. Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
The Africa CDC says all countries on the continent are eligible to participate in the coronavirus antibody tests, although only 7 countries have so far expressed interest to start immediately. They are Liberia, Sierra Leone, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Morocco.
So those are the first set of countries that have committed. So remember, this will be an ongoing exercise until we get as many countries as possible. We as Africa CDC must be forceful and aggressive in pursuing this survey so that we truly know the picture of what is going on our continent. And as a continental body, it becomes incumbent on us to provide those answers very quickly.
Blood samples will be tested to determine if a patient's immune system has developed antibodies against the virus. The presence of such antibodies indicates that a person is likely to have been infected by COVID in the past. The Africa CDC says such data will help them understand how the virus is spreading and could help prevention efforts in the future.
Probably heard testing in this outbreak or pandemic is very, very important. And the test continues to be to evolve in terms of performance. We hope that in the coming weeks we'll be able to put out guidance on the use of more rapid tests like the antigen test, which can actually allow for a quick turnaround time and to identify contacts.
A number of Western governments are already using the antibody tests to find out how many of their citizens have been infected, hoping that this information will help them to reopen their economies. So far, the continent has done 9.4 million COVID-19 tests, with only 10 countries having conducted 80% of those tests. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And let's turn our attention to South Africa, where there have been fears that response fatigue is setting in as the nation tops 500,000 infections. South Africa is the worst hit country on the continent, but there are some encouraging signs. The Western Cape region is trying to avoid complacency in the implementation of anti-epidemic measures. Travis Andrews reports.
For many residents of Cape Town, life has changed since COVID-19 hit. Everyone has to contend with the daily reality of sanitizing, wearing masks and regularly washing hands. That's especially true for the Peterson family, who reside in Bridgetown on the Cape Flats. Pensioners who are largely still holed up in their homes due to the lockdown. They've taught their grandchildren the importance of washing their hands. As a family, they are firmly committed to preventing the spread of COVID-19, but not everyone within the community is playing their part.
In our community, you still see people wearing masks. You still hear them washing their hands and using the sanitizer. But here and there, then you get some that is not using the mask. And sometimes, especially in the shops here in our community, people the shop owner have to remind some people to wear the mask.
Okay, what was the old number? But the city is trying to reshape perceptions about COVID-19 to avoid complacency and response fatigue setting in. The COVID-19 Informal Traders Toolkit is being used to assist such efforts. By donating social distancing mats and hand sanitizers, the municipality is trying to drive home the message about the need for continued vigilance against COVID-19.
Try our level best as a municipality to ensure that the importance and the knowledge of what is happening around us is actually brought to them so that they can understand that there is some urgency in the matter, that there is a seriousness about this pandemic, so that they can also know that they can also be affected. So yes, we have some people that are negligent, but yet on the other hand, we have a lot of people that are complying very well under the circumstances.
Most experts agree the fight against COVID-19 will be a lengthy campaign, and that in itself creates challenges for this community, because complacency can set in at an accelerated rate, and that could lead to an increase in community spread. Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
The UN says that the COVID-19 pandemic will worsen acute malnutrition in Zimbabwe. Millions of children are already considered vulnerable due to a severe drought in 2019. Farai Mwakatuya reports.
It's lunchtime, and dozens of children from impoverished households in Harare's Kambuzuma high-density suburb gather at Opachiwashira's home for a plate of food. For most of them, the only one they are guaranteed of today.
I want to make sure that the children get something to eat. It's easier for an adult to go hungry all day, but it's unbearable for a child.
Chiwashira, who's been feeding vulnerable children since 2008, says things have worsened since the COVID-19 outbreak.
Many parents were informal vendors who haven't been able to work under the lockdown. So we actually have some children who bring lunch boxes so they can carry leftovers to the adults back home. Things have become that desperate.
Already, some of Zimbabwe's urban poor are receiving food aid following last year's drought. More will require assistance owing to the COVID-19 crisis, but with the government strapped for cash, not all of them will get it.
If nothing is done, we will likely foresee a situation where a lot of our households in urban areas are going to be food insecure. A lot of people going to bed without having a meal.
Luckily, these young ones have no such worries for now. With their tummies finally full, these young children can now get down to the serious business of play, something vitally important for their development, but which they may have been unable to properly do because of the nutritional deficiencies. Those not fortunate enough may live with the consequences.
Knowing from the signs of nutrition, what affects our children, mostly those under 5s, it's going to affect them later in life. They're most likely going to be standard shorter than they should be compared to other children of the same age. That's our biggest challenge. And if they're shorter, they're also most likely going to be obese adults. And where someone gains weight and they're obese, they're also going to then suffer a lot of these associated complications, diabetes, hypertension, the several cancers.
It's a vicious cycle that can only be broken now. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. Time now for a short break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Taking care of COVID-19 patient, there is always that anxiety.
Handling money is very dangerous.
Wearing of masks has become the new normal for some of them while performing.
Since the ban of alcohol in South Africa, I don't have a job.
Set a big vision.
First trip to Africa, my impressions are, wow, it's a land full of hope. In Africa, there are so many young people who could be entrepreneurs. They believe what they're doing and they want to make this thing big. So what if we have Africa Bill Gates, Africa Jack Ma? I realized that I have to do something. The African Entrepreneur Prize is giving the inspirations to all the entrepreneurs in Africa. I think we should make them heroes. If the heroes succeed, a lot of people want to be heroes. They can start their dream and change the continent.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Let's turn our attention to Belarus, where President Alexander Lukashenko is telling people to stay home or risk becoming cannon fodder. Protests against Lukashenko continued into their 6th day on Friday. Protesters say elections held on Sunday were rigged. But the president say the demonstrators are being used by foreign countries wanting to stir up trouble. His main rival, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who has fled the country, called for protests to continue over the weekend. The European Union is preparing to impose sanctions due to the disrupted elections. Now Lukashenko continues his crackdown on protesters. The World Health Organization has voiced concern over the rising cases of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Health officials have recorded 86 cases and 36 deaths since June this year. The latest outbreak occurred in the northwest DRC. The COVID-19 pandemic has complicated response efforts. Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The Director General of the World Health Organization has described the growing number of Ebola cases in the DRC's northwestern province of Equator as worrying. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says the cases have spread across 9 health zones since June 1st. Some of the cases are scattered across remote areas, which has made it difficult for health workers to reach patients. The DRC government is facing challenges in containing the outbreak because it's battling other epidemics like measles and COVID-19. The WHO has announced $2.5 million of funding to support the response effort, but it says more money is needed to bring the outbreak under control. The outbreak in Equator province is the 11th to occur in the DRC. It was announced 3 weeks before the country's worst Ebola outbreak was declared over in the east. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Angola's Supreme Court has sentenced the son of former President Jose Eduardo dos Santos to 5 years in prison over a $500 million corruption case. Jose Filimono dos Santos is among several prominent Angolans who have fallen out of favor since President João Lourenço assumed office 3 years ago. Dos Santos is the former head of Angola's $5 billion sovereign wealth fund. He was found guilty, along with 3 other defendants, of transferring money to a Credit Suisse account in London. He stood trial alongside the former central bank governor, Walter Felipe da Silva, who was handed an 8-year prison sentence. The 2 others, a business partner of Dos Santos and a former central bank official, were also found guilty. For many passengers traveling by train, usually it involves touching many surfaces. That means that keeping passengers and crews safe from the coronavirus can be quite challenging. But for staff of Kenya Railways and AfriStar, it's part of their job since standard gauge railway services resumed last month. Enoch Sikolia took a ride aboard a train from Nairobi to Mombasa and reports on how COVID-19 is being kept at bay.
Crowded places, shared surfaces, and interaction between people at stations and on trains all have the potential to spread the coronavirus between travelers and even towns in Kenya. So what is the Kenya Railways and the Afristar, the company operating the standard gauge railway, doing to make travelers feel safe on board? Let's start from the point you arrive at the station. The use of face masks is mandatory. It's the most important measure being used to minimize the risk of transmission aboard the train. To ensure security, officers are using sniffer dogs and scanners to screen travelers. No officer is allowed to touch the passenger's luggage. Signs have been placed everywhere asking people to observe social distancing. Here at the SGR terminal in Nairobi, Kenya, they are doing everything to ensure the safety of passengers, from where they sit to how they stand and how they go through the scanners. For example, they are not allowed to scan their tickets. The whole essence is to ensure minimal interaction with surfaces. How we travel by train has changed. Going forward, passengers will have to get used to seeing train attendants in personal protective gear. Rahima Zikimana is a UK citizen. She arrived in Kenya accompanied by her mother and sisters. The resumption of international flights means the family can now enjoy their summer in the East African nation known for safari tourism. They are headed to Mombasa, Kenya's coastal tourism city.
I feel quite safe because there's a lot more security processes within the SGR than in the transport, in terms of like the airplane and stuff like that. So I feel very safe.
Maureen Joki is an attendant aboard the SGR train. She says things have been tough since passenger trains resumed services almost a month ago. PPEs have replaced uniforms and the interaction between attendants and passengers has been reduced significantly, and that has sometimes affected travelers.
When they see you with these PPEs, some of them they're scared, some of them they're not sure how is the situation in the train.
I'm not in a confined space like the plane. This one, there is enough ventilation.
To ensure social distancing, the SGR train operator has reduced the number of passengers on one trip from slightly over 1,000 to 500 only. This is to avoid crowding on the train, which could lead to the rapid spread of COVID-19. How people sit here also matters a lot.
A place where we have two seats, only one passenger will occupy the seat, and the other row, only one passenger. So for a row, it's only one passenger.
Safety measures employed in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, are also in use at the SGR terminal in Mombasa. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Thousands of British holidaymakers have been scrambling to return from France after a new quarantine directive by the UK government. The measures, which came into effect today, require people arriving in the UK to be quarantined for 14 days. The requirement also applies to those arriving from the Netherlands, Monaco, Malta, Turks and Caicos, and Aruba. Authorities say that the decision was triggered when the rate of infection in the affected countries exceeded 20 cases per 100,000 people over 7 days. The move sparked a mass exodus among the estimated 160,000 British holidaymakers that were in France. Some officials have criticized the move, saying that the UK needs a more sustainable long-term plan for the resumption of travel. France has warned that it will take reciprocal measures. Once again, you're watching Africa Live. Time now for another short break. More news ahead. Don't go away.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for tuning in. Egypt's hard-hit tourist industry has been given a significant boost with the news that no COVID-19 cases have been reported among visitors in the month since travelers started returning to the North African nation. Egypt suspended virtually all air traffic for about 100 days as part of wide-ranging measures to combat the pandemic. Here's Yasser Hakim with more from Cairo.
It's been a promising period for tourism in Egypt. According to the Ministry of Tourism, 86,000 tourists arrived to the North African country since July 1st, and they have all returned home virus-free.
The protocol of the Ministry of Health, together with the Ministry of Tourism, has a very strict rules on all hotels receiving clients. Buffet style does not exist anymore in the resorts. And of course, there is swimming pools are closed, jacuzzi, sauna, all are closed. All entertainment and activities on the beach are not there anymore due to the fact that we have to keep the social distancing and allowing a safe distance between clients. Of course, rooms has the maximum capacity of 2 people inside the room. And of course, everywhere is sanitized and rooms cannot be checked in before at least 24 hours after the last checkout.
Egypt had earlier suspended flights and tourism for 100 days. When it resumed, visitors were only allowed to stay in 3 governorates with the least cases of COVID-19. They are Matruh, South Sinai, and the Red Sea, which include the popular resort cities of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada.
We can say that Belarus and Ukraine were number 1 and 2. Still to Hurghada, we received Swiss, Hungarian, and Serbian clients to Hurghada. We are having very high hopes that having a safe destination will attract more and more tourists from different parts of Europe.
Some experts believe tourism could witness a boom in October as the important UK, German, and Italian markets are expected to return to Egypt in large numbers. Yes, Hakim, CGTN, Cairo.
And South Sudan's central bank says it has started to buy gold from local producers. It set aside $5.5 million to buy bullion to add to its gold reserves. Africa's youngest state is heavily reliant on crude oil sales to fund government operations and bring its foreign currency earnings up. A collapse in oil prices has seen FX reserves decline. From Juba, here's Patrick Oyet.
The Bank of South Sudan says it is building its reserves and it has already begun buying gold from 3 different locations within South Sudan. The country has several sites for artisanal and small-scale gold mining, which are being eyed for the deposits.
We want to do it as fast as possible. When we reach a situation that we have got enough crude gold, then we shall have to think of a mini refinery to refine this gold.
The central bank says holding gold in addition to cash reserves gives the economy extra stability, and it says if South Sudan wants to borrow money from another financial institution or country, the bank could use gold as collateral. However, some economists in South Sudan say purchasing gold could take the central bank's focus of its central role.
I say it's a policy that will not really benefit the government because the central bank should be looking at other ways of improving the financial system, improving the financial sector, improving the exchange rate market so that it generates the appetite for investors and even for small businesses to be able to carry out the business. And when they do that, then the government can make more revenue.
Years of civil war have left South Sudan's economy in ruins. The 2018 peace deal is currently under implementation, and the Bank of South Sudan says the new government resulting from the peace deal needs funds.
Peace is to be supported with money. And to be supported with money, who is to support it? An institution like Bank of South Sudan is to support it. That is why we are going for these crazy ideas, to get money and we support the peace.
The Apex Bank says the value of gold has been rising in the international market, making it a better option for saving money. It plans to buy more if its current purchasing is successful, adding that it would allocate more funds for the gold business if the current purchase is successful. South Sudan's economy depends on oil money to fund 98% of its budget and is looking at diversifying its economy. The coronavirus pandemic has resulted in a fall in oil price and revenue for South Sudan's government. Juba now says it is looking for other sources of revenue and financial stability. It believes gold reserves are one of the ways of achieving that. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Let's head to South Africa once again, where the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the growth of telemedicine as more people adjust to social distancing and avoid visiting hospitals. Online consultations with doctors have improved access to health care for many in the country. Travis Andrews has the details.
Since COVID-19 hit South Africa, it's placed massive pressure on the country's health resources. But people with other diseases also need to be treated. This has forced healthcare providers to seek other ways to attend to these patients. This is where telemedicine comes in, as a way of minimizing physical contact between doctors and patients, which is important in curbing the spread of COVID-19.
One of the benefits of telemedicine, of course, is access to healthcare for people who are remote from healthcare, which is obviously a problem in South Africa. And I think that's classically the way that the regulator was looking at it. You'll be aware of the fact that many patients have access problems. There's large parts of the population who are in rural areas. And although they might have problems with access to the internet, they have even more problems with access to doctors.
Remote consultations are especially helpful when it comes to treating chronically ill patients, as they minimize the need for regular visits to the healthcare providers and hospitals. The Healthcare Professions Council of South Africa has updated its guidelines on telemedicine and has adopted a less restrictive approach.
Initially, they felt that there had to be a healthcare professional at both ends of the line. So in other words, the patient had to be next to a healthcare professional and the person they was consulting was a healthcare professional as well. Then they changed it to you could consult with the patient that you'd seen previously. And now they've liberalized it even more, if you will, to the extent that you don't even have to know the patient, have seen them previously.
The Healthcare Professions Council of South Africa's updated guidelines on telemedicine is being seen by the industry as recognition that this form of consultation will play an important role in South Africa's overall healthcare strategy, as poverty will remain an issue in the future and so will inaccessibility to doctors. And players in the technology sector have been monitoring developments closely as new startups head out of the sprinting blocks early to position themselves ahead of the curve.
We've got Logbox locally, but there's many others. And so we're definitely seeing a movement in that regard. And I think a pandemic like this is definitely going to be a fire lit under this whole industry to fast track some of the technology that we've had that wasn't quite mature enough yet to be used on the scale.
And with broader adoption, the price of healthcare could potentially decrease as technology begins to develop and more healthcare providers opt for telehealth as an additional means for patients' consultation. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And we're not done just yet. We've got more interesting stories coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. In our continuing series, Made in Africa, we take you to Morocco, which produces what's considered the world's best argan oil.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be a leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
Once again, known as liquid gold, Morocco produces what many believe to be the best argan oil in the world. For centuries, argan oil has been used for culinary purposes and as a beauty aid. The amber-hued oil is produced by a number of cooperatives in Morocco, helping to empower rural women. Let's take a look.
درنا أرغان على أساس هو الشجرة اللي كتواجد عندنا في المنطقة، يعني المنتوج اللي عندنا في المنطقة هو الأرغان. ما كاينش شي حاجة أخرى تقريبا اللي يخدموا فيها العيالات من غير الأرغان. على أساس أنه العيالات كانوا كيخدموا غير في ديورهم، ويعني كل وحدة كتخدم في دارها. فكرنا قلنا علاش لا ما نديروش شي مقر اللي يجمعنا كاملين، حيت كانوا كيخدموا بحال شكل ديال التويزه اللي كانوا كيخدموا بها شحال هذا. وفكرنا باش ندير واحد المشروع ديال موديل للداخل ديال التعاونيه اللي نتجمعوا فيه، منها نحافظوا على الموروث ديالنا. لطيفة يتعبو رئيسة التعاونية الفلاحية النسوية تيريزيت لإنتاج وتسويق زيت الأرغان ومشتقاته. يعني تفضلوا معنا، مرحبا بكم باش نوريكم الخطوات والمراحل اللي كيدوزوا فيه زيت الأرغان. مرحبا بكم وتفضلوا معنا. حتى 2013 عاد درنا واحد الجروب اللي فيه 8 ديال لي كوبيراتيف اللي كنحاولوا نتجمعوا فيه يعني ونقلبوا على الحلول ديال المشاكل اللي كاينين عندنا كاملين. وبالتالي يعني الا جينا نقولوا المهم بحال الا كنتي بوحدك، بحال الا كنتي مع اتحاد، ولكن اتحاد قوه. تقريبا 30 مستفيده اللي كاينه، وكل وحده كتخدم في ليطاب ديال الارغان، يعني اللي هو مبني بشراكه ما بين الجماعه والمبادره الوطنيه للتنميه البشريه. ولاو العيالات كيف ما قلنا في الاول انهم عندهم واحد البلاصه اللي كتجمعهم، كاين ينتجوا زيت الارغان، كنحاولوا نقلبوا على الاسواق وعلى المعارض، وبالتالي يعني داك الربح تيرجع للعيالات كيعاونوا به وليداتهم المصاريف اليوميه ديالهم، وحنا عايشين الحمد لله. هذه المرحله الاولى كيحيدوا فيها القشره الارغان، يعني كتسمى مرحله ديال التقشير. هذه المرحله الاولى ديال التقشير. هذه المرحله الثانيه ديال التهراس. هذه المرحله ديال التحميص. الا بغيناه باش يكون عندنا الارغان اليمونتير كنحاولوا نديروا التحميص عن طريق لا ماشين اللي كدير كدور، يكون فيها الزنين اللي هو اليمونتير. المرحله الاخرى كنخدموا الارغان ديال الكوسميتيك اللي كنديروا الزنين في هذا البوق ديال لا ماشين، وبالتالي كيخرج لنا زيت ارغان. هذا كيتسمى أرغان ديال الماكلة، أرغان أليمونتير ارتيزان، يعني بطريقة تقليدية. ملي كنديروا الطريقة ديال العصير كنمشيو للتعمار. هنا تنديروا فيه تيكتاج وكنعمروا فيه القراعي. هنا كاين البرودوي فيني. بالنسبه للارغان يعني ليه مطالب كثيره، بحيث انه لقاو فيه عده منافع بالنسبه للانسان، بحال الاوميغا 3 اوميغا 9، يعني اللي هو واحد سميتو اللي هي مفيده للصحه. كذلك بالنسبه للتجميل راه كيخرجوا به دابا لي كريم لي شامبوان، بزاف ديال الحوايج اللي كيستافدوا بها سواء بالنسبه للرجال ولا بالنسبه للنساء، يعني مطلوب بزاف. ما بقاوش كاع الناس ديال المنطقه كيستافدوا بها ولا الناس اللي هما ديالهم، بحيث انه كيتصدر لبرا. بالنسبه للكوسميتيك كيمشي حتى ل 600 درهم تقريبا اللتر. بالنسبه للاليمونتير 250 300. ولكن في ظل التكوينات والتحسيس اللي كيتلقاوها العيالات داخل التعاونيه، استطاعوا انهم يفرضوا الوجود ديالهم ويفرضوا كذلك الطاقه ديالهم والذات ديالهم في ذاك المشروع اللي هما خدامين فيه. من غير هذوك المشاكل ديال انهم بالنسبه للاسره كيكون صعيب باش توفقي ما بين الدار وما بين العمل، باش خصنا مثلا نكريو المقر ولا ندبروا عليه. يعني المراه ديال العالم القروي كيكون صعيب عليها باش انها تخرج تواصل مع الناس ديال المحيط ديالها، بحيث انه تيكون داك حشومه لا انا داك فلان كنحشم منه ولا هذا. المهم بالنسبه للمراه يعني شحال هذا كيف ما قلنا لنا كتكون حشومه ديال الدار ما تخرج وهذا، ولكن الحمد لله ملي كتكون المراه قويه وفارضه الوجود ديالها وفارضه ذاتها اللي كيجعلها انها تصرف على الاسره ديالها، تكون استقلاليه عندها، تشري داكشي اللي بغات، تمشي فين ما بغات. المهم ماشي الفرق كبير، قويه الحمد لله.
A teenage photographer in Tanzania is using her work to highlight the country's ethnic diversity. 17-year-old Iranian Nta says she wants to eliminate stereotypes held in the West about Africa and Tanzania in particular. Daniel Kija reports from Dar es Salaam.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And for Tanzanian teenager Iranian Nta, her photographs speak volumes about the people and country she loves. After just 4 years as a photographer, her work is now on display in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's commercial capital.
If people hear these stories and hear about the people, they'll come to learn how amazing the culture is here, everything about the people, how welcoming they are, the country itself, and how diverse it is. So I feel like people would want to come here more often and learn more about the country itself. So, yeah.
Rania visited almost every region of Tanzania, taking photos that showcase the country's 120 ethnic groups and its extraordinary diversity. To Rania Nta, this is more than just a photo exhibition. She says shows like these can be tools to boost tourism. She has now donated all the pieces that are on display here to the Tanzania Tourism Board to help promote Tanzania as a unique destination. Tanzania's Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, Dr. Damas Ndumbaro, says the pictures show the very best of Tanzania, something that Western media outlets don't always show.
Our upcoming and young artists must be given an opportunity to showcase their work, to promote Tanzania and to promote Africa.
Meanwhile, Rania says she hopes to see many more Tanzanian artists stepping up to show off their work.
In order to make a difference, it's very important to show your work. So, like how I did, and I'm at such a young age, I feel like people who are younger or older, no matter what age, should do exactly what I did, because I feel like through this project I made a lot of change and difference in how people view the country as well.
With the Tanzanian government promoting its tourism heavily recently, Rania hopes that art and photography can also be used as a medium to attract tourists. It is a challenge in the short term though, with visitor numbers starting to recover after plunging during the coronavirus pandemic. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Stay with us. We've got your sports news coming up. Here's a peek at the headlines.